Hello again. All right, so we're about to embark on a bit of a journey. This is probably the last time we'll see it complete it for at least, I don't know, a week or two. So I've got the new transmission, 6 speeds ready to go in. The only thing is, it would be easy to just drop the trans. Well, not easy, but it would be easier to just drop the trans, leave the motor in place. But I've got a few things I want to knock out. For starters, all of this has to change. We're going to run the vacuum lines under the intake manifold to get rid of this and this one. I need to get the fuel filter installed, and then I also want to brace the downpipe. So the downpipe's kind of just floating right now, and I'd like to have it locked to the motor with a brace. And then a big one is I want to heat shield the brake lines. They are way too close to that downpipe. That air gap is actually probably enough. I'd probably never see any actual fade from it, but I'll just feel a lot better if there's a giant heat shield in the way. Alright, so here's the first shot of the template. It's pretty close, not perfect. So I must have had some kind of weird extension on this one. Look at the difference. But these came out almost perfect. I think I need to shift the hole about 2 millimeters outward. And then I need to figure out where the heck my... Alright, so made a bunch of progress this weekend. We got the heat shield created. We used some 3D scanning techniques to find the bolt holes, then convert it to a template, which is over there. I'm not going to traverse this mess to get to it. Laid the template onto the board, or onto the aluminum sheet, and then cut it out. Got a pretty good fitment. You can see the you can kind of see the bolts or the studs behind the board, or behind the sheet. I'm gonna get, I already ordered M6 collar, basically joiner bolts, so it'll screw onto the studs, and then I'll be able to run a nut or a bolt into that. So all in all, it's coming out pretty good. I'm gonna do one more over here on the near the brake booster and the fuel filter, so it'll be about there. All right, so I would say we made some successful progress. So the heat shielding's done. We did the 3D scanning on the firewall, made the template, transferred it to the shield, then added another one, welded it at the seam on the back end, and created a brace, so they only needed one more bolt to hold everything in. It's very sturdy. The next part was work on is some bracing. So we've got a couple things we're working with. Basically, we've got the downpipe, which will be braced somewhere around here, but then we also have the wastegate dump tube. And I noticed that when I went to take the assembly off, the tube had gone from somewhere like this, how I had it set, and it had eventually just leaned into the bracket and was contacting it, which means this thing's moving, which also means that if I make this any longer, it's going to put even more weight on it and make it more prone to moving. So what I've decided to do was to brace. I'm gonna use this hole right here as the anchor, and I've got some flat stainless I'm gonna cut out and drill a hole, and then I've got some exhaust hanger material that I'm gonna have act as a just a brace to come from here and then lock against the tube. It should work. I mean, these tubes do see a lot of heat, but it's for brief moments. I'm more concerned about that guy. So let's go ahead and get this one knocked out, and once we've got this brace set up, I should be able to then move on to this one. I just wanted to make sure that this downpipe or dump tube. All right, so here's the rig I had set up for the downpipe, the dump tube. So the plate is drilled. I just took some dowel rod, ran it to the pipe, tacked out the rod, and now I just need to go and finish welding the rest of the support. All right, so we've got the bracket made. Came out pretty good. Welds, not so much, but not horrible. So basically, it seems like it worked pretty well. You know, what I didn't really account for was that it would make getting the clamp on a lot easier, because I can just kind of slide this in there, get the bolt started. I mean, that's about as good as you could hope for. We got the mounting brackets finished for the wastegate. So I have that bolted into the block, and then it comes to here, and the clamp's not even on, and she's nice and secured. We're gonna do one more for the downpipe. We're gonna connect it to this little anchor right here, and then just have a steel rod come up, stainless. Other than that, I did tap the head. I've got to tinker around to get the bolts that I want to use correctly, but that should be good. I did have a coolant leak there, so I replaced the O-rings and added some sealant around the fittings. So that's the only other thing we got done. Well, not the only other thing, but the other thing we got done was the bracing. So the bracing's finished on the downpipe. This was really tough to make. I broke out I went and bought a plasma welder and to cut this hole out of this stainless, and still need to work on the technique, but it's all good. Yeah, created a brace for the downpipe and for the wastegate. So these are nice and locked in, and yeah, I need to do some tidying up of the wiring. I want to make it a little bit cleaner, just, you know, a little bit tighter to the block, and, you know, terminate it a little better. And then yeah, it's going back together, and I should be putting the motor in tomorrow. So excited to get it back on the street. And then this is the trim that we should be taking it to the track in. So pending everything goes well with the new trans, I should be on track pretty soon. Yay. I'm finishing up the exhaust. That is the downpipe and wastegate dump. Loving how it came out. Yes, I know the welded garbage, but the shape is perfect. Yeah. Yeah. All right. So I just got done doing some highway pulls. Really starting to lean on it a little bit more with the new trans. Seemed okay, no complaints. LSD seems to be working. I've got no more torque steer, and the car just hooks and books. A few little, I got one little bolt that came loose for the drain, tightened that, but otherwise no leaks, pretty flawless. I did have to dink around obviously with the speed sensor, but I got that mostly figured out. So we're about done with this phase. We're ready to move forward. The next step is to get it tuned up for the street. Make sure I can do a 0 to 100 pull with no problems. And then once I can do 0 to 100, she'll be ready for the 8th mile. So I'm gonna make sure I've got that conquered on the street, and then I will either tow it or drive it to Yellow Belly, and we'll see what she can do. So until then, stay tuned.